Wonderful to be here, and I'm very grateful to Aaron for his show of confidence in me and recommending me today. We got to serve together in Baton Rouge some years ago, and we were there during Katrina, and that was quite a thing. And I was the senior pastor, but Aaron was the leader. Gift of leadership in that fellow. And of course, it's manifesting now in his wonderful church in Galveston. But during that time, crisis time, I was out of my element, and my skill set and gifting was not adequate for the task. But guys like Aaron, he was the college minister, but went global as far as the needs of our church. And he's one of the reasons why we got through and had quite a vital ministry under very dire circumstances. So God bless you. I like Aaron, except that he's tall. Did you notice? Terrible. I make it a point not to stand next to Aaron. And then there's John Wills right there. John Wills from Champion Forest, which is up near Canada, I think. And John and I got to serve at Sagemont. I don't know how long ago, John, but it was a wonderful experience. And I was telling, I think, Josh, John Wills does the work of 5 normal people. Just tremendous capacities. He could do anything. Not with a smile, but still. Anyway, great to see you, John. Well, I've been at Sagemont for almost 30 years, and as Kevin mentioned, we were without a pastor for the last year, and by God's grace, it obligated and forced those of us on staff to get together and get out of our comfort zone and lead, though not a one of us is equipped to be the senior pastor of a church that way. And so we found in each other the pooled contribution of our team that we were able to do it. And now our new pastor has come from Georgia. His name is Levi. How could you say no to a guy named Levi? Levi Skipper, and he's on site. Aaron, he's 6'4". What's the deal? God hates me. Anyway, he's been with us and is just such a refreshing blessing. He almost was able to be with me today. I wanted him to get to meet you all and you to meet him because we're part of the UBA and so glad to be a part. But he wasn't able to come today, but he will come on another occasion. Well, I'm glad to speak with you just informally about some of the stressors we all experience in the ministry. Here's one: ministering outside our area of gifting. So let me ask you a rhetorical question. This is just for you. Identify your primary spiritual gift. You already have done this, but put a one-word label on it. I have the gift of. It's just private. And now move past your primary gifting. Do the same thing. What would be your secondary area of gifting? Just to kind of focus on those things. And let me make this statement. Most of us as pastors, I would say, unfortunately, oftentimes are obligated to minister outside our area of gifting. It's just the nature of things. And that's kind of a problem, because we could expect God's grace to serve in our God-given area of gifting, but I'm not sure we could expect His grace to sustain us when we are serving outside our area of gifting on a prolonged basis. And when we are, the evidence is stress. So look, if you're serving in your area of gifting, you're going to get tired. That's just the way it is. But the solution to that kind of fatigue is a nap, a day off, a vacation. You recoup, you get revived, you're ready to go again. On the other hand, if you're serving outside your area of gifting, a nap won't help. A day off, not even a week-long vacation, because that fatigue is emotional. It's emotional distress. So it's really, really important for us to do everything we could to resist the temptation to serve outside our area of gifting. So to illustrate, in the church in which Aaron and I served is Streamer Baptist Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a really great church. Are you staying in touch with anybody over there? So I get to every. You know, I went to Israel with a bunch of East Truman's about a year ago. We had a great time. But anyway, I had an administrator, and you remember him, Ron, gifted, and I'm not in that area. So I could do administration, but because it's not my primary or secondary area of gifting, it was emotionally draining and exhausting. And so I was finding my resources being quite depleted and experiencing not only stress, but also depression. I would pull up to the church and not want to be there. So then I diagnosed the problem. That's not my area of gifting. I like to communicate the Word of God, and I do good with people. People do not tire me out. Projects do. And so this consummate administrator was so wonderful. I went to him and admitted this to him. And I said, Ron, in order for me to have some longevity here and be sustained, we have to enter into an unusual kind of partnership. And so what I would do with him on the morning of every evening on which we had all our meetings, finance and personnel, all that stuff, I would meet with him and just share my thoughts and concerns and vision and things like that. And then he would go to the meetings. So that's unusual for the senior pastor not to attend the meetings. I actually did, but I wouldn't sit down. The members of the finance team or personnel team would be there, and I simply would go to each one and literally lay my hands on them and thank them, not as pastor, but as member of the church, for serving the church. And then I would pray for them, and then I would say, I'm going to take leave of you now. You have much important business to do, and so I'm very, very grateful for what you do. And that would be it. Now, that's kind of an unusual thing, but I had to do it so as to keep from being outside of my area of gifting on a prolonged basis. And it actually worked. So one of the sources of stress, please evaluate yourself. You're not serving in your primary area of gifting. Another source of stress, a too narrow interpretation of the call into ministry. Now here I may step on toes, and I don't mean to do it. This is a supernatural thing. However you define a calling is very hard to define. You know you got it or you don't. But are you called really to be the lead pastor of a church? I'll elaborate on this. If you were to ask the average person, what is the gift that the pastor of a church most needs in order for him to have a satisfying and a prolonged experience as pastor, what would it be? The average person would say the gift of preaching. In fact, we're called that. Here's the preacher. Here's the preacher. Even though probably only about 10% of our week is involved in sermon preparation and preaching, still we're called the preacher. Also, our seminaries and Bible colleges are focused on preparing us to preach. But the studies actually indicate that it's not the gift of preaching, it's the supernatural gift of leadership that does two things. One, it increases the probability that that pastor will have a satisfying and sustained experience as pastor. Second, will have the lowest levels of stress in the ministry. So a leader has to provide vision and a plan and give a sense of direction and has to move people to a deeper level of maturity and commitment. And a leader, just to be basic, has to have followers. Is that you? Be honest with yourself. You see, many good men, it seems to me, who do not have the gift of leadership are leading our churches. And therefore, I'm wondering why so many of us struggle. I don't want to cause distress and unduly cause you to question your call. I just want to maybe help you to have permission to say, maybe I interpret it a little too narrowly. So if you're serving in the position of lead pastor and don't have the gift of leadership, you're going to experience stress. To call attention to Aaron again, because you made the mistake of coming. Gift of leadership. Gift of leadership. That's his zone. Now, I'm not saying a guy like Aaron doesn't experience stressors and things like that, but the overseeing function is him. It's not everybody. So please give yourself permission to figure that out. That doesn't mean you're not called to the ministry, but maybe you too narrowly defined the specific platform of ministry. Here's another source of stress. It's just the inherent stress of being in ministry. So, folks, it is stressful to serve the members of our church. And I don't want to be a downer, but it will be increasingly the case that it's going to be more difficult to minister to our members. And that's due to a lot of reasons. One, many more people than ever are coming into our churches who are unstable. You can't even use the term dysfunctional family anymore because that's everybody. The norm in our churches is not the family consisting of husband, wife, and 2 kids. It's actually the single parent family. So there are many, many people coming into church today with a whole set of new needs that you may be quite proficient in Greek and Hebrew, but those languages are not going to set you up to deal with the kinds of needs that are coming into our churches today. So there is inherent in the ministry stress. So I came upon a verse of scripture some years ago, and I would say it kind of liberated me in some ways from this kind of stress. Listen to this. 2 Corinthians 4:5. For we do not preach ourselves, but Christ Jesus as Lord, and ourselves, listen to this, as your bondservants. Then what does it say? Anybody know? For Jesus' sake. Set me free. I knew I was a bondservant, but I thought I was a bondservant for their sake. Now I'll tell you what that meant. If I had that mentality, that meant their agenda had to be mine. Which means they set the pace for me. Now, one time I pastored a church in Ohio, and it was a relatively small church, 100 some odd people. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I gave them a survey one time. What are your expectations of your pastor? That was a mistake. So out of the church of about 100 people, I got a list of 101, not Dalmatians, 101 expectations. Now, it really bothered me and overwhelmed me. I couldn't figure out why, and then I figured it out. Each individual expectation was legitimate, couldn't argue with it. It was the composite picture, however, that was overwhelming to me. Who has the audacity to think you could do all that? It's not possible to do it. Now, we're flattered. People think we could actually pull that off. Nobody can. I'm older, I think, than just about everyone here. And so I remember the Ed Sullivan Show. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Okay, good. Thanks for playing. So Ed Sullivan, he was on, and those were in the days of black and white TV. And if you wanted to change the channel, man, you talk about primitive civilization. You actually had to get up and do it yourself. But anyway, so my sisters and I would gather on the TV, Ed Sullivan Show, variety show. And one of our favorite acts was the plate spinner. Remember this guy? He would have these long poles and these plates, and he'd set up the first plate and spin it. Second, third, going well. Gets to fourth and fifth, and these plates up front begin to kind of teeter and totter. My sisters and I would scream out to the TV, "Hey, mister, plate number 2 is about to fall off." But as if he could hear us, he'd run back to the deal and spin it some more, go blah, blah, blah. And then it occurred to me, oh my goodness, that's how we do the ministry. We're plate spinners, and every member gives us the plate to spin. That is not leadership. That's seeking to please people. Your servants, that's true, but not for their sake, for Jesus' sake. So what really helped me is to determine, oh God, what is the plate? The 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 that you have for me to spin. You'll get grace to spin those plates. You will not get grace to spin the plates others hand you. So let me encourage you, 2 Corinthians 4:5. That is our role. We're not dictators. We don't tell people what to do. We're not autocratic. This is our role. We're bondservants, but for Jesus' sake, not for the sake of each individual member. Taking on and trying to spin everybody's plate will cause enormous stress. All right, another source of stress, mishandling criticism and complaints. And man, it is open season on pastors today. For some reason, I'll explain. Let me begin this way. Every member in our church, just about every member, is connected to three families. The family of origin, the one you got born into, family by marriage, if you're married, and then your church family. If you can think of those families as three concentric circles, they're unique, but they overlap to some extent. So that unresolved issues in one of those families is going to spill over in the others. Now, here's the problem, fellas, you who are pastors. You are the father surrogate. And you say, wait a second, I didn't sign up for this. I'm the Great Commission guy. I'm the evangelism guy. I'm the discipleship guy. I'm the preaching guy. I'm the pastor. Dude, I'm nobody's father. I'm not here to, it's not in my job description to be surrogate dad. Too bad. People will transfer onto you unresolved issues and woundedness they have with their biological father. Whether it's fair or not, it happens. You say, that's crazy. I'm just young. I'm younger than their father. Chronological age is irrelevant. You are a male authority figure. So their premier male authority figure has been their dad, if they had one. And if they didn't have a dad, this transference is going to even be more telling, because you're going to be the dad they never had. And so they're going to come to you sometimes, and people in your church gravitate towards the same roles they assumed in their family of origin. That's how it works. So a problem with a church member might be due to an unresolved problem with that person's family in disguise. You got to analyze this right. Otherwise, you're going to take problems, criticisms, and complaints too personally. And I don't care how thick-skinned you are, you'll get crushed by it. So recognizing this spillover, say from family of origin to church family, you being the surrogate dad, is going to relieve the pressure and minimize the temptation to feel personally targeted and attacked. Now, that's all theory. Let me bring it to home. I was the interim pastor for a number of months at First Baptist Manville, Texas. Had a great experience. I was there for 7 months. It was wonderful. The people got together and decided to redecorate the worship center. And we had a debt-free philosophy. And so the money was raised, and it was $50,000, which was a lot for this particular church. But there it was, cash on the barrelhead. And when it came in, we spent it. And people did a lot of the work themselves. We painted, we recarpeted, we refurbished it, and it's done. And our first Sunday is there. So when I got up, I wanted to affirm everybody, which I did. And I horsed around and I said, for those of you who don't believe in miracles, good night. Here we are, an undivided, still united church, even though we had to weigh in on colors in the sanctuary here. We didn't split even over colors. It's a miracle. And we were just having fun, and I was just thanking everybody for kind of doing this Christianly. So I thought that was kind of a benign comment to make. I mean, who's going to get on your case for a word of affirmation? Well, the guy did. So that was the kind of church in those days where you have a receiving line at the end. People go by, they say, Pastor, that was a very good sermon. And you're going, well, man, how do you know you slept through half of it? But anyway, you shake hands, you say, thank you very much. Anyway, in line, in earshot of others, this man, who I didn't know well, older man, he said, you are a liar. Ain't it fun to be in the ministry? In front of everybody. I said, well, now, sir, that's a very serious accusation. What do you mean? He said, you cannot possibly believe what you said, affirming people and complimenting them on this and getting their priorities right. I said, what do you mean? He said, there are people all around our church, needy people, and y'all wasted $50,000 on paint and carpeting. And I said, well, sir, you're missing the point. We did not subtract from our benevolent fund. We're not neglecting the folks in our community. This was debt-free, cash on the barrelhead, boom, boom, boom. It didn't seem to appease him or help him whatsoever. And it was a big mistake on my part to try to reason with him in that setting. Big mistake. But I did tell him, we need to talk some more. So the next day, not because I was so spiritual and looking forward to this, I was mad, ticked off, and couldn't sleep, and all the rest. So I called him and I said, sir, we ought to get together and have breakfast. And I thought I'll diffuse it with some humor. And I said, and you could pay. Man, he was not happy at all. He was like nothing. Anyway, we got together and we had breakfast. And I brought information, like a notebook with data, just to show him our accounting stuff and how we're not misusing the money and all this kind of deal. I never got to it because the issue was not the issue. So I began to hear about his story. He was the son of a railroad guy, a guy who worked on the railroad, conductor or something. And he said he remembers when he was a kid, oftentimes going to the train station with his mom, standing on the platform and watching his dad wave goodbye as the train left the station, he being left behind. And it occurred to me, I'm triggering the same feelings in this guy's life unintentionally. He was feeling left behind. Why? Well, because I was trying to get younger people on our teams and committees and all that kind of stuff to kind of reinvigorate the church somewhat. And he was developing the impression that the movement, though it was exciting and exhilarating, was leaving him behind right at that train station. And remember, I told you, the pastor is a surrogate dad. Even though he was my senior in years, he was transferring his unresolved issues with his dad onto me. And so his criticism and complaining, you know what it was? An adult way of crying. People think of it that way, and then you won't take it personally. It is an appropriate way. In an inappropriate way to express your hurt. I got it. But people do this. Little kids cry, adults complain. What was he complaining about? What was he asking for? Attention. Don't leave me behind. Please see me still to have some value. I'm not dead yet. And so you know what I did? I just valued him. It was simple. Gave him attention. I don't want to say we became bosom buddies. That's just a little unrealistic. But we became close. So this helped me to see how to deal with complaints and criticism without taking it personally and being crushed. So the presenting problem is a complaint, but the presenting problem is not the issue. The issue is almost never in the head. It's always in the wounded heart. So too church splits. I wish we actually had church splits over legitimate doctrinal issues. I wish our congregants were astute enough to take a stand on theological matters. A split may masquerade that way, but it's usually like I got rejected as a deacon, or the pastor didn't greet me warmly on Sunday. Something like that. So don't misinterpret criticism and complaints. A complaint is a ticket into your office. Inappropriate. Why does the person just say, Pastor, we got to talk? Some do, others don't. Others will get you in the receiving line, call you a liar, and obligate you to be in their lives. I didn't say it's right. I'm just saying it happens. If we're going to survive the ministry and not be unduly stressed, then don't misinterpret criticism and complaints. And you're going to see more and more of this because, as I mentioned, more and more of our people are coming to us with tremendous wounds, abuse, abandonment, neglect, and just sheer and utter instability in an increasingly unstable environment. Our people are afraid and scared, just as little children are. They're coming to us as surrogate dads. They don't know how to come and say, I'm afraid and scared. I don't know what the future holds. My job is in jeopardy, etc., etc. They don't know how to say that. So instead they say, I don't like you. Now let's talk. Okay, rule of thumb. If you cannot solve a problem through rational process, the problem presented to you is probably emotional. That's why I made a mistake to try to reason together with this man in the receiving line. Missed the mark because he was speaking the language of hurt feelings. I was speaking the language of reason. So, okay, that's a big one. Then this one. I'll go fast and give you a chance to make comments or ask questions if you'd like. This has to do with kind of daily self-evaluation. Paul, in giving advice to those who serve, said this, you're familiar with it, Acts 20:28, be on guard for yourself and for all the flock. What comes first? Yeah, be on guard for yourself. In other words, pay attention to your spiritual condition. Yeah. The ministry can distract us from it. Isn't that ironic? Paul says, no, pay attention to your spiritual condition. So I found 3 diagnostic questions that I ask myself almost every day. These are advanced by a man named Dr. David Boyd. Here they are. These are good diagnostic questions. Here's the first. How am I feeling today? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Halt. You know about it?
Yeah.
In ministering to those with various addictions, we borrow that acronym HALT because men and women struggling with addictions who fall back into it, oftentimes the precursor to it, to relapse, is one of those deals. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So we counsel those who struggle with addictions, man, you got to take care of yourself. So too pastors do. You get up in the morning, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And I'll tell you why. If your answer is yes to one or more of those, you're going to be vulnerable to trying to get those needs met through your members. And God's not going to bless that. You may have an affair. Boy, is that picking up steam. And if you don't think it's never happened to you, oh my goodness. The spirit is willing. Your flesh stinks. A little bit of a paraphrase. So the godly man is the man who's terrified at his possibility of crossing the line. And therefore, he sets lines in the sand. By the way, guys, you should never, ever ride alone in a car with a woman other than your wife. I mean, never. I'm into pastoral hugs. I think that's good. Touch communicates good things. Pastoral hug, side to side. You do not pull the lady in. It's more like this. You do not do this frontal deal. You say you, it just means affirmation and affection. What does it mean to her? You're setting yourself, you just set God. Now you can be accused of anything, but if people know you live by these standards, you'll be able to make a better defense. You should never counsel with a woman behind a closed door that doesn't have a window, a lock. If you got your counseling hours, but you make an exception for this working lady who could only meet with you at 7:30 at night when nobody's in the building, why are you willing to make an exception for her, but you won't make it for some guy? It's because you're hungry, you're angry, you're lonely, or you're tired. And here's what you say: I deserve a break today. These people want a piece of me. Every one of them wants something from me. What about my needs? When you get feeling like that, you're this close to fulfilling, satisfying legitimate God-given needs illegitimately. So you ask the question, how am I feeling today? It'll prepare you, protect you from the temptation of trying to meet one of those needs illegitimately. Second question, who am I? I'll tell you the answer. You're a child of the King. That's who you are. No, you happen to be a pastor or whatever. I got that. That's just something God gave you to do to keep you off the streets.
That's great.
Mark 3:14, and he appointed 12 so that they might be with him. And then as a byproduct, he might send them out to preach. We didn't get called to preach. We got called to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Then we bypass the with him concept. And we're in the ministry now. And we're running on our own gas. That's called stress. First love. I'm a child of the King. Long after this church is gone and all this kind of stuff, I'm going to be with Jesus forever. Why not cultivate the relationship now? First question, how am I feeling today? Second, who am I? And third, what am I trying to do? Today, as I start my ministry day, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to fix everybody? Come on. Am I trying to win everybody's favor? No grace for that stuff. Am I trying to get my needs met through this person I'm about to meet with? Don't do it. What am I trying to do today? Oh, God. I'm trying to walk in the good works which you prepared for me beforehand. And I'm going to do it in the fullness of your Spirit, not in my own flesh and strength. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to succeed. I'm not trying to win everybody's favor. I just want to walk in the good works which you have prepared beforehand. 3 diagnostic questions. It'll protect you from stress and getting into trouble. One final thing, source of stress. We're just doing a survey. There's much more we could speak about, but just this one has to do with our expectations in the ministry. When you and I entered the ministry, even though maybe we wouldn't admit to it, our expectation was success. I know we like to think of ourselves as being quite virtuous, and we're entering into the ministry because we want to serve people and glorify God. I know it's true, but not entirely. We want to be successful. Now, the problem is we define success in quantitative terms. That's why we say to each other, how many are you running? We don't ask whose lives are being transformed. What's your disciple-making pathway? How many are you running in Sunday school? What's your budget? Quantitative terms. That's success. Now, here's the problem. Since most of us are not going to attain to those measures of success, we feel inadequate and we feel under stress. But what about qualitative measures of success? I was a missionary in Germany 1,000,000 years ago with a group called the Navigators, and I was at a missions conference. I sat at a table with some folks who were ministering. They were Americans, an American couple, serving in Germany Turkish immigrants. They were called Gastarbeiten, guest workers. The economy in Turkey was so bad, these poor people had to leave their comfort zone, come into Germany to try to find employment. And this magnificent couple thought, that's the demographic we're going to reach. That's the unreached people, because they were really a marginalized group of second-class citizens in Germany. So this American couple went, and I asked them questions just like I'm talking to you about. I said, so how many converts from Islam, this Turkish population, mostly Islamic, how many converts from Islam have you seen? And they told me 12 in the 6 years in which we've been here ministering. Well, I think they could tell by my nonverbal that I was shocked. What? 6 years? 12 measly old converts? So as if they could read my goofball thoughts, they said, but we are perfectly satisfied because we've been faithful and have left the results up to God. Faithful, not successful, as we define success in quantitative terms. Faithful. We could all minimize stress and have satisfaction in the ministry if we're just faithful. Who's God put on your plate? We all come from churches of different kinds and sizes and demographics and all the rest. Irrelevant. Who's on your plate? Don't look to somebody else's. Faithful. Leave the results to Almighty God. It'll minimize stress. We'll finish well. And you know what the Lord will say. And this is what we want him to say. Good job. Good and successful.
Faithful, sir.
Good and faithful, sir.